You just picked up your phone, didn't you? Go on, admit it. It's okay. That little twitch, that reflex, the buzz you thought you felt, or just that sudden, oh, I wonder if feeling. It's got its hooks in us, hasn't it, deeply? I know for me, just the thought of accidentally leaving my phone at home for, I don't know, a few hours, it brings this weird, almost gut-level dread. I am completely, undeniably well hooked.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling, I think that resonates with so many people listening right now, myself included, definitely. It's a shared experience, isn't it? And well, ever since these incredibly powerful little rectangles landed in our pockets, we've been having this intense, ongoing debate. Are they good for us? Bad? You know, what's the right age for kids? Should social media have limits? What about phones in schools? These aren't just like philosophical questions anymore. They're really pressing concerns, shaping policy, shaping how parents feel. It just seems to get more intense every year.
You absolutely hit the nail on the head. And that is precisely what we're diving into today. This whole pervasive, complicated impact smartphones have on, well, everything. Our daily routines, our mental health, those big societal talks about rules, regulations, and even just our own habits. So we've gathered a whole stack of sources, articles, reports, some pretty deep research, even some personal accounts. And our mission really is to pull out the key insights for you. We want to get to the bottom of what the evidence actually says. Are smartphones really hurting us? Especially young people, and crucially, what do the students themselves think? The ones right in the middle of it all. Okay, let's unpack this, and maybe we should start by getting a little uncomfortably personal, right? Because if we're going to talk honestly about this, about teenagers and phones and school bans, we really have to start with ourselves, don't we? I don't know about you, but every single week my phone flashes up that screen time report, and every week I just flick, swipe it away. It's like this mix of fear and honestly a bit of shame. My brain just screams, nope. Not looking. I'm actually a bit nervous doing this, but okay. I'm pulling up my settings right now. Live.
You are so not alone in that feeling. That quick flick away, I think that's universal. It's that little moment of truth we'd rather avoid, maybe. Mine just pulled up too. And yeah, I can feel my pulse quicken a tiny bit. It's always confronting. All right. Ready when you are. Let's face the music. 3, 2, 1.
Mine's still thinking about it. Oh, the drama. It knows. It knows I don't want to see this. It's putting up a fight. Okay, it's loaded. Finally. Right, you first. Show me yours. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off.
Okay, deep breath. Mine is showing. Wow. An average of 4 hours and 14 minutes every single day. 4 hours and 14 minutes. That's a lot of time when you say it out loud. Time spent. Or any time. Wasted, depending on the day, I suppose. And I'm genuinely quite surprised, actually, because I really try. I set time limits on Instagram, you know, the usual suspects, 15, maybe 20 minutes a day. And like clockwork, the little notification pops up. You've reached your time limit. Very polite. But then what do I do? Almost without thinking. Press ignore limit. Every single time. It's less a choice, more just a reflex now. The friction is basically zero, right? And the pull is just...
Exactly. Mine does the you're going into sleep mode thing and whoosh, gone. Pretend I never saw it. Maybe my phone's being kind today. Maybe it senses my fragility. Oh, it's here now. Okay, it's claiming 3 hours and 29 minutes. But no, absolutely not. That has to be wrong. Yeah. That is way lower than usual. Normally, I'm easily tipping towards 5 hours. Minimum. It's definitely trying to make me feel better. Plus, it's a little digital heart. But it's fascinating seeing it there in black and white, isn't it? Beyond just the total time, what are your biggest time sinks? What apps are pulling you in? I think I know mine.
Oh, it's a depressingly familiar list, I suspect. WhatsApp, Instagram, naturally. But then there are the slightly more functional but still addictive ones, like eBay, Amazon, and yes, Hinge is definitely up there too. It's this weird mix, isn't it? Things I genuinely need to do or tell myself I need to do versus just pure scrolling. Pure distraction, all those notifications, the constant newness. It's a battle for attention all day long.
Oh, completely. WhatsApp and Instagram, for me, zero surprises. And having ADHD, I find those notifications almost physically hard to resist. You know, the little pings, the vibrations, they just demand attention. I'll pick up my phone for something totally legitimate, like, you know, internet banking, reading a news headline, replying to an important message. But then I just cannot ignore the other stuff. That little red badge, the number creeping up. And yeah, that dopamine hit you get from a fresh scroll is almost a compulsion. I can't stand having an unread notification or an unread email. That genuinely gives me anxiety. I have to clear them all, constantly check just to feel like I've got a clean slate, you know, so I can actually think about other things. It's exhausting, actually. It's a real pull, almost like an addiction in itself.
I completely get that. That need for the clean slate, it sounds draining, that constant vigilance, and probably, if we're being honest, not the healthiest cycle for either of us. It really shows how these devices kind of subtly rewire our thinking, creating these new little anxieties, even while promising convenience.
Not healthy at all. Nope. I definitely think I'm using my phone way, way too much. But it does make you wonder, how does our personal, slightly embarrassing screen time actually stack up against the average? Because I have a feeling we're probably not that unusual here, are we? Given how glued everyone seems to be.
You're right. We are very much not outliers. It's actually quite tricky to get one single consistent global number for this. The tracking methods vary a lot between studies, regions, But the statistics we do have are pretty compelling. Some solid research suggests adults, so people over 18, are averaging almost 5 hours a day on their phones. So your usual range and my current average, well, we're right in there, aren't we? At the higher end, maybe, but definitely within the norm. Makes me feel slightly less bad, actually, knowing it's such a widespread thing, almost standard in many parts of the world.
That does help, weirdly. 4 hours and 14 minutes suddenly sounds almost reasonable-ish.
Yeah.
It's like finding out everyone else is secretly eating cake for breakfast. Guilt-less is a bit.
It does, doesn't it? But, okay, here's where it gets more concerning. When we look at younger people, the numbers jump significantly. This is where the real anxiety starts to build, I think. The CDC in the US, for example, they estimated overall screen time, and that's a key point. It includes computers, TVs, tablets, not just phones, for 11 to 14-year-olds. An incredible 9 hours a day. And for 15 to 18-year-olds, it was around 7.5 hours. Just think about that. 9 hours. For a kid who's maybe 12 or 13, that's more time than they sleep, often. More time than school.
Okay, right. Suddenly my 3 hours and 29 minutes, even if it's dodgy data, looks positively restrained. But you're right, that's not even counting my laptop time or watching something on TV, which would definitely push my number up quite a bit higher.
Exactly. And what's really striking coming out of various reports is that nearly half of teenagers self-report using the internet almost constantly. It's not just checking messages now and then. It's this state of near permanent connection. So yeah, the data is clear. Phone use, screen time in general, it's rising everywhere. But for younger generations, that curve is particularly steep. And this trend, this undeniable rise, it forms the perfect logical backdrop for why suddenly so many governments, international bodies, they're all seriously talking about bans, restrictions. It feels like an almost inevitable reaction, doesn't it, to what people see as this massive growing influence and potentially a growing problem.
So it's clear this isn't just about my personal willpower failing against Instagram Reels. It's way bigger. It's global. And when millions, billions of us are wrestling with this, it naturally spills over into the public square, into policy, this widespread digital tethering. It's not just a personal issue anymore. It's forcing this huge question at the highest levels. What are governments, what are international organizations actually doing about it? Is regulation the answer?
Oh, there's absolutely a global conversation happening, and it's moving fast. It's gone from worried articles to actual policy proposals really quickly. A huge moment was in 2023 when a major UN report came out and specifically recommended banning smartphones in schools globally. And the main reasons they cited, pretty straightforward, really. One, reduce classroom disruption, something teachers everywhere complain about, right? And two, crucially, protect kids from online bullying and harmful content. That's become a massive concern for parents, educators, mental health folks. And this isn't just, the UN making suggestions. We're seeing actual trials, actual laws being debated and passed around the world. It signals a real shift.
Okay, give us some examples. Where is this actually happening on the ground? What do these bans or trials look like in practice?
Sure. Well, take France. They're running a trial right now, calling it a digital pause. Over 200 schools are involved, and teenagers have to hand in their phones at reception when they arrive. The idea is to create a completely phone-free zone during the school day, see if it boosts focus, interaction, that sort of thing. Then here in the UK, it's a huge political football right now. It's all over the news, loads of debate in Parliament. The government is seriously looking at laws that could ban social media entirely for under 16s. It's moving fast, lots of pressure from parent groups. Meanwhile, over in the US, it's more patchy, state by state, you know how it is. But Florida passed a pretty significant bill. It bans social media for under 14s and needs parental consent for 14 and 15-year-olds. That's due to kick in January 2025. Though it's already facing legal challenges, naturally. But maybe the most ambitious talk is coming from Australia. They're not just talking school bans. They've declared they're bringing in world-leading legislation to ban under 16s from social media platforms. Full stop. The Australian Prime Minister even said, "Parents, we're listening to you." Which tells you a lot about the political drive behind it, right? It's tapping into that parental anxiety. The really interesting question in all this, though, is how much are the actual teenagers being asked? You know, the ones whose lives these policies directly change.
That's a fantastic point. Their voice is often seen missing. But let's stick with Australia for a second. World-leading legislation. Sounds massive. Sweeping. What are the nuts and bolts? How do they actually plan to do that? And what are the immediate red flags or concerns being raised about making it work?
It is definitely bold, unprecedented, really. And yeah, the devil is absolutely in the detail, and a lot of those details are still being hammered out. Australia's internet regulator has basically got the next year to figure out how on earth this will work before the laws actually start. But from what the government said, there will likely be exemptions. Kids with existing accounts, maybe. Or if parents give explicit permission, it's all a bit vague still. But crucially, the tech companies themselves will face massive fines if they don't comply. So the pressure's on them. But yeah, it immediately throws up a million practical questions, like messaging apps and gaming sites, apparently exempt. Which straight away makes you ask, well, what about Snapchat? Is that messaging? Social media? Both. Where do you draw the line? Defining social media platform legally is going to be a nightmare. And then there's the how. They're talking about trialing age verification tech. But again, very few specifics on how it would work reliably for millions, maybe billions of users globally. You know, are we talking uploading passports, facial scanning? These things raise huge privacy alarms, obviously. Think about collecting ID documents for an entire generation. Plus, these technologies aren't foolproof. They can be tricked. And the ethics around AI analyzing kids' faces, it's murky. Honestly, the sheer technical challenge of verifying every kid's age accurately and ethically, no one's cracked that yet. Some experts just call it technically impossible at scale. So, is the whole plan even viable?
Right. So tons of unknowns, potential loopholes, massive privacy implications. How are people reacting? Parents, tech firms, the experts? Must be some strong feelings flying around.
Oh, absolutely. It's completely split. On one side, you've got parents and family groups who are largely applauding it. They see it as necessary protection, finally someone doing something. Fits right in with the government's "we're listening" message, significant public support there. But then the tech companies are sounding the alarm. They're warning it could just push children into more unregulated parts of the internet. Basically, if you block the mainstream apps, kids might find riskier ways to connect online, potentially making them more vulnerable. It's their standard defense, partly user safety concern, partly protecting their user base, you could argue. And then you have the academics, the experts in child development and tech. They're mostly quite critical, calling it too blunt an instrument. Their main point is that the evidence base isn't solid enough for such a drastic one-size-fits-all ban. They argue the focus should be twofold. First, much tougher regulation to make platforms safer by design. You know, force companies to build in safeguards, reduce addictive features, prioritize well-being. And second, focus on educating kids, teaching them digital literacy, critical thinking, how to navigate online risks safely, how algorithms work, rather than just cutting them off. It's that core debate, prohibition versus education and systemic change. They worry a ban just stops kids from learning skills they actually need in today's world.
That point from the experts that the evidence base might not be solid enough for these huge bans. That's really interesting, isn't it? Especially when government seems so keen. Which brings us right to the scientific core of this, doesn't it? Beyond the headlines and the politics, what does the actual science say? Is there a clear link? Smartphone use and mental health, particularly for young people.
This is exactly where it gets incredibly messy and where the scientific community is genuinely divided. You're right to zoom in on that. On one side, you have scientists who are quite emphatic. They say, we definitely have data. They argue the evidence clearly shows phones are harming young people's mental health. They point to studies, rising trends in anxiety, depression, self-harm among teens that seem to coincide with smartphone adoption. They see a clear negative impact. But then, on the other side, you have many equally respected scientists arguing just as strongly that there's not robust data to prove a direct causal link. They say we need better, longer-term studies. Ideally, those gold standard randomized controlled trials before we can definitively say phones cause these problems, rather than just being correlated with them, or if other factors are the real drivers. It's a massive challenge separating cause and effect in social science.
Okay, so when people like Professor Etchells call for randomized controlled trials, what does that actually mean for listeners? Why is that the gold standard here, and why is it so hard to do?
Great question. It's key to understanding the evidence gap. So a randomized controlled trial, an RCT, it's like the ultimate scientific detective tool for proving cause and effect. Ideally for this phone question, you'd need two massive similar groups of kids. Group A goes to schools with strict phone bans. Group B goes to schools without bans. They'd be randomly assigned to each group. Then you'd follow them for years, maybe a decade or more, meticulously tracking their mental health, grades, social skills, everything. The random part is vital because it helps ensure any other differences between the kids' family background, personality, whatever, are spread out evenly. So if you see a difference in outcomes later, you can be much more confident it was caused by the phone ban, not just a coincidence. You can see the problem, right? Ethically, practically. You just can't randomly assign real kids to different types of schooling for years just for a study. It's incredibly difficult, borderline impossible. And that's why getting that super robust data is so tough. Now, one really prominent voice arguing strongly for a causal link, despite those challenges, is the social psychologist Jonathan Haidt. His work has massively influenced this debate. He has this compelling theory about a complete transformation of childhood that happened incredibly fast, basically between 2010 and 2015. He paints this stark picture. Before 2010, hardly any kids had smartphones like we know them. No high-speed data everywhere. You actually paid per text message. Being online for hours was hard, maybe impossible. Kids had flip phones, maybe. Their social life was mostly offline. Fast forward to 2015, suddenly almost all teens have a smartphone. High-speed data, Instagram accounts, Snapchat. They could be online 10 hours a day, easily. And Haidt's point is, even when they weren't on the phone, they were thinking about it, waiting for notifications, comparing their real life to the curated online feeds. His core argument is that human childhood evolved over millennia with certain needs. Kids need unstructured play, face-to-face social learning, the messy stuff, learning adult skills through real-world experience, taking risks. Haidt argues that this sudden shift to a phone-based childhood effectively blocks almost every avenue of development that evolution prepared them for. It replaces real-world interaction with something fundamentally different and potentially damaging. Playgrounds replaced by portals, basically.
Wow. So Haidt's not just saying phones are a distraction. He's saying they fundamentally rewired the environment where kids learn to be human, that the developmental pathways themselves are being rerouted. That's a huge claim.
Exactly. It forces you to ask, have we accidentally swapped out things like unstructured play, dealing with conflict face-to-face, even just being bored, which fosters creativity and resilience? Have we swapped all that for a constant digital feedback loop, one that maybe fuels anxiety, comparison, feeling inadequate? It's a real paradigm shift in thinking about development in the digital age. He's suggesting a direct causal link between this massive environmental change and the mental health trends we're seeing. And he backs this up by pointing to what he calls the elbow, or this dramatic bend in mental health stats, this worrying rise in anxiety, depression, self-harm, even suicidal thoughts. It really started taking off around 2013, particularly for Gen Z, kids born from 96 onwards. He contrasts that sharply with millennials, born 81 to 95. Their mental health was actually, on average, getting slightly better in the early 2010s, just before this shift. Haidt uses this really powerful analogy. He says, the rise in mental health issues since then is like a mountain range going up from baseline to the top of Mount Everest. He acknowledges COVID caused a little spike near the top, a noticeable bump, sure, but the Mount Everest itself, that huge sustained climb and distress. He argues that's the phone-based childhood. He's basically saying COVID was a blip compared to this fundamental transformation. It's a very stark, quite alarming picture.
That Mount Everest analogy versus just a little spike for COVID. That really lands the scale of the impact Haidt is talking about. It frames it not as a temporary crisis, but a fundamental change in experience. But okay, are there other recent studies, maybe ones that get a bit closer to that gold standard evidence that either support or maybe challenge Haidt's view?
There is one, yes. A big study from Norway really made headlines this year globally. And what it found, its results were pretty significant, was that implementing smartphone bans in schools led to less bullying, better mental health, and better outcomes for teenagers. And interestingly, the positive effects seemed particularly strong for girls from low socioeconomic backgrounds. This study got a lot of attention because it was longer term, tracking students over time, and looked at a range of outcomes. It's definitely one that scientists I've spoken to say has propelled the debate, especially for those parent and teacher groups campaigning for bans. It gives them a solid data point. But there's always a but in science, isn't there? There's an important nuance here that the professor I discussed it with pointed out. There was variation in the study, meaning not all the schools enforced the ban the same way. Some were super strict phones handed in at the door. Others were more lenient, maybe phones allowed in pockets, just not used in class. And the professor's conclusion: The study doesn't actually provide enough evidence to say that the really strict ban is always necessary. In fact, he suggested that often a more lenient ban, like phones on person but off during lessons, could be just as effective as taking them away completely. So yes, the study supports the idea that bans can help, but it also suggests maybe a total confiscation isn't the only way. Context matters. Implementation matters. It allows for more flexible approaches.
That's a really key distinction. It's not just if you ban, but how. And maybe stricter isn't always proportionally better. So while Norway points towards some benefits from restrictions, are there academics pushing back hard against these kinds of blanket bans? Especially the idea of banning social media entirely for under 16s?
Oh, absolutely. Many academics strongly disagree with that idea, arguing it's way too simplistic and could even backfire. Professor Pete Etchells, who we mentioned, is very vocal on this. He argues quite forcefully that we just haven't done any good studies, especially those rigorous RCTs we talked about, looking at the long-term effects, positive or negative, of these bans. He really stresses understanding the long game, not just the immediate impact, because behavior change is complex. And he points to history, where regulations like this have, anecdotally at least, tended to backfire. He often uses the South Korea Cinderella Law from 2011 as a cautionary tale. Remember that. It banned kids from accessing the internet between midnight and 6 a.m. The goal was more sleep, better grades. But what actually happened? On average, kids gained just an extra minute and a half of sleep per night, barely anything. And worse, it actually increased the amount of time that they spent on the internet overall because they just crammed it in earlier in the evening before the ban kicked in. The ban didn't change the underlying desire or behavior, it just shifted it. It basically taught kids how to get around rules, not how to build healthier habits.
That South Korea example is pretty damning, isn't it? A classic case of unintended consequences. So what's the lesson Professor Etchells draws from that? If banning isn't the answer, what is his core argument for tackling this?
His core argument, really, is that there's nothing magical about the age of 16. The idea that you hit 16, get a phone, and suddenly you're equipped to handle it perfectly. It's just unrealistic. He believes the real focus needs to be much broader, much earlier. It's about how do we support people of all ages, especially children and young people, in developing healthier habits and healthier relationships with digital tech, so that whenever they do get a smartphone, whether it's 12, 14, 16, they're properly equipped to use it safely and responsibly. It's all about proactive education, building skills, fostering digital literacy from a young age, not just putting up a wall at an arbitrary age. Give them the tools, don't just build a fence. And he takes it further than just individual skills or education. Ultimately, he stresses we absolutely need to hold tech companies to account. The goal, he says, must be ensuring that these platforms put our well-being and our safety at the core of their design and not treat it as an afterthought. Cynthia, that implies a fundamental change in how tech is built, not just how we use it. Designing for human thriving, not just maximizing engagement. Think transparent algorithms, opt-in notifications by default, features that genuinely encourage breaks, not endless scrolling. It's systemic change.
Which brings us right back to that central knot, doesn't it? All this talk about mental health data, rising phone use, it slams us right into that classic scientific problem Professor Etchells mentioned, correlation versus causation. Can you break that down simply for our listeners? What's the difference and why is it so devilishly hard to untangle here?
It absolutely does. And it's maybe the most crucial and most frustrating part of this whole puzzle. It is incredibly difficult to prove definitively if worsening mental health is caused by phones or if it's just happening at the same time as increased phone use correlated. The classic analogy is ice cream sales and shark attacks. In summer, both go up. They're correlated. But eating ice cream doesn't cause shark attacks, right? The heat, the underlying factor, causes more swimming, leading to more shark encounters and more ice cream sales. It's the same challenge here. Are phones directly causing mental health issues? Or are both rising due to other complex factors, maybe societal pressures, economic anxiety, changes in family life, academic stress, or something else entirely we haven't even identified? It's really hard to isolate just one cause. For example, we see the numbers suggesting teen mental health looks worse. But some scientists argue there could be other things going on. Maybe we're just talking about mental health much more openly now. It's less stigmatized. We have better language for anxiety, depression, things that maybe weren't discussed or diagnosed as much back in, say, 2010. So it might look like rates are soaring partly because awareness and reporting have increased, even if the underlying true rate hasn't changed quite as dramatically solely due to phones. It could be a mix of factors. It's this incredibly complex web of influences, and pulling out that one thread, the phone's direct causal impact, is profoundly difficult, which of course makes deciding on policies like bans really challenging.
Which leads perfectly to the next, maybe most vital question. I mean, it's all this expert debate, all the scientific uncertainty, all these grand government plans. What do the actual young people think? The ones whose lives these bans would impact most directly.
Their voices are absolutely critical and honestly often bring a surprising level of nuance to the table. We heard from several students directly affected, and their perspectives add so much depth. Let's start with Sonia. She's 16. She said she'd actually be pretty okay with a phone ban during school hours. Why? Because she enjoys socializing with a lot of my friends during the day anyway. So for her, the phone isn't the be-all and end-all of her social life. She values that face-to-face time. But almost in the same breath, Sonia raised a really important practical point: safety. She said she'd feel a little unsafe if she couldn't reach someone in an emergency or if she got into trouble. That basic security, that lifeline a phone represents, especially as teens gain independence, that's a huge factor for them and for parents too. And interestingly, she also defended social media itself. She argued she wouldn't be as knowledgeable about real-world experiences and a lot of struggles without it. She sees it as giving insight into people's daily lives around the globe, making her aware of her surroundings, different living conditions, global events, social issues. So for Sonia, it's not just mindless strolling. It's a window onto the world, a source of awareness, maybe even a form of civic engagement. That really challenges the purely negative view, doesn't it?
It really does. Social media as a tool for global awareness and empathy, that's not usually the first thing people mention in these debates. Fascinating. What about the students in France, where they're actually living through some of these digital pause experiments and stricter rules? What are their takes?
Yeah, we heard from French students too, and again, quite varied views. 𝐬𝐴R, who's 16 in high school, he actually thought the digital experiment was a great idea. He saw the benefit in reducing distraction, but he also felt strongly that high schoolers should have phones. Why? For independence. He argued phones help them manage their own schedule, track appointments, take notes for projects. He sees it as a tool for developing responsibility, preparing for life after school. But he drew a very clear line based on age, a common theme we heard. He felt younger kids, middle schoolers, were too young and really need to stay away from all these distractions. He believed the phone can have a true impact on their life at that age, affecting their developing brains and social skills more profoundly. A real maturity distinction there. Then there was Arlene, 17, also in a French high school. She observed that, yeah, most students use their phones everywhere, corridors, lunch, breaks, just not actually in class with the teacher. But despite that near constant use, she also thought the digital pause experiment might be a very good idea, even for older students like her. Her reasoning. She felt it's very important to take pulls, meaning deliberate breaks, and to actively draw away from the screen. She voiced a real concern about addiction, warning that without breaks, you become an addict and you start to do nothing and to be a sedentary person. That's remarkably self-aware. She even gave a personal example. If she's alone, not with friends, she admits her default is just to watch some video on her phone. She stressed the need to consciously choose other things, to discover things in the school, go in the library to read. It sounds like a real internal struggle, a desire for something deeper that the phone often overshadows.
It really does sound like they're grappling with it themselves. That tension between the phone's pull and wanting something more, something real. What about kids who are just plain annoyed by how much other people are using their phones? Did that perspective come through?
Definitely. Richard, another 16-year-old in France, articulated that frustration really clearly. He talked about seeing classmates lock themselves in the bathrooms to use the phone or film TikToks during school time. He also noticed people waiting for the opportunity to quickly whip out their phone and use it a little bit the second the teacher wasn't looking. He found that constant, almost sneaky usage very annoying and felt it disrupted the school atmosphere. And maybe his most insightful point was about focus. He said he feels the newer generation, and he explicitly included himself, can really have trouble focusing for a long period of time just because of all the content we watch or just getting easily distracted by the phone. So even among the users, there's this clear recognition of the impact on attention spans, the constant battle against digital distraction.
Richard's point about the bathrooms, quickly whipping out the phone. Wow, that paints a picture, doesn't it? It suggests something almost compulsive, needing that hit even in secret moments. And his comment about the newer generation struggling with focus because of all the content, that's incredibly self-aware. How does that connect back to Hayden's ideas about childhood being re-engineered?
It connects hugely. Richer observations coming from inside that generation are so powerful. The bathroom example highlights that intense pull, right? It's become a private space for digital engagement when public use is frowned upon. It shows how hard self-regulation is when the phone's reward system is so immediate. And his self-awareness about focus. It directly echoes Haigh's thesis. If your brain is constantly trained by notifications, short videos, rapid context switching, then yeah, logically, sitting down to focus deeply on a complex problem or read a book for an hour becomes much, much harder. It's not necessarily a lack of intelligence or willpower. It's potentially, as Haight argues, that their cognitive habits are being shaped differently by the digital environment. They might be brilliant multitaskers, but struggle with the sustained, deep focus that traditional education and many jobs still require. What all these student voices really show is the nuance. It's not black and white for them either. There's a real appreciation for the independence, the safety, even the knowledge and connection phones offer, but there's also this deep, often uncomfortable awareness of the downsides. The distraction, the potential for addiction, the social pressures, the impact on focus, the erosion of face-to-face interaction. They aren't a monolith. They're wrestling with these complexities just like us, maybe even more intensely because it's the water they swim in. Their perspectives are crucial. Any policy needs to consider their reality, aiming for empowerment, not just protection.
So if the students themselves have these complex, sometimes conflicting views, and governments are pushing for these big, potentially blunt force bans, how are the actual tech companies reacting? The ones who make these platforms, are they engaging? Are they pushing back? Staying quiet?
It's been, well, a bit of a mixed bag and quite revealing, actually. For a while, and still largely, not many of the companies have commented publicly on these specific government plans. They tend to prefer lobbying behind closed doors. But Meta, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, they have started speaking up, especially about the really ambitious plans like Australia's. Their main public concerns are around the practicalities. How would age verification work reliably and at scale? They rightly raise flags about the technical challenges and the sheer amount of personal data that might need to be shared to make it happen, which, as we talked about, opens up huge privacy and security cans of worms for potentially millions of users. They're pointing out the logistical nightmare. Meta has also strategically argued that the app stores, Google Play, Apple's App Store, should be the ones to enforce these age restrictions, not the individual apps. That's clearly an attempt to shift the burden, the responsibility, and the potential legal headache onto the platform gatekeepers. But maybe feeling the heat, some apps are introducing their own measures. Instagram now has teen accounts with default private settings. They've added a sleep mode to nudge users off late at night. Meta claims these steps will limit the contents teens can see and maybe reduce screen time. So while pushing back against government overreach, they're also trying to show they're, quote, trying to do things to reduce the amount of time that people are spending on phones and also like the harmful material they can access. It looks like a defensive move, partly, an acknowledgement they need to be seen to be doing something, even if critics say these are minor tweaks that don't address the core addictive design.
Right, a bit of concern about feasibility, a bit of responsibility shifting, and some cautious self-regulation steps. Okay, but let's bring it back down to earth. Back to me, back to you listening. Because honestly, after all this talk, I know I'm still going to hit ignore limit later today. That 4 hours, or probably more, it's still happening. So what can we actually do? What can I do? What can you listening do to try and claw back some of that time, some of that mental space from this thing that feels so essential, but also so draining?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's tough. We shouldn't put all the burden on individuals when the tech is designed to hook us. But yeah, there are definitely things we can try, ranging from the pretty extreme to the more manageable. On the really extreme end, there's a small but growing trend, especially among some teens in the US and UK, of abandoning your smartphone altogether and get a brick phone, like a complete swap.
A brick phone. Wow.
Yeah.
Not just a detox week, but like permanently.
Yeah.
I genuinely don't know if I could function. Maps, banking, work stuff, travel. It feels almost impossible now.
It's a huge leap, absolutely. Not practical for most. But the people who do it, they often talk about this massive drop in anxiety, sleeping better, feeling more present, less pressure to respond instantly, less social media comparison. Some people try a kind of hybrid approach. They keep their smartphone for work and essential daily stuff, but maybe use a basic brick phone when they go out socially or on weekends specifically to disconnect. That way, you still have the safety net you can call someone if needed, but you remove the constant lure of notifications, scrolling, the whole smart ecosystem that keeps pulling you back in. It's about creating intentional friction.
Okay, the hybrid sounds slightly more doable, but still. Maps, taxi apps, train times. My ADHD brain relies so heavily on those organizational tools. It feels like a really big step down in functionality for someone like me.
It absolutely is. And it won't work for everyone, especially when these devices are genuinely useful for so many things. But there are less drastic steps focused on creating boundaries. My ADHD coach actually suggested something to me around New Year's. I was all fired up, this is the year, I'm cracking the phone habit.
And judging by the 4 hours and 14 minutes,
Yeah.
How did that resolution go?
Yeah, wow. Clearly, I completely failed on that front, as established. But the idea she gave me was brilliant, and I still think about it. She suggested making a little box, like get a nice box, maybe decorate it, make it look appealing, and then you designate specific times for phone in a box time, put the phone physically in the box, maybe during dinner, maybe the hour before bed, maybe when you need to do deep work. And the key, she said, the reason for making it nice is that it's not a punishment. It's the phone's bed. It's cozy. You're putting your phone to phone bed.
Phone bed. I love that. That framing is so much better than phone jail or something punitive. It makes it sound kind, like you're giving it and yourself a needed rest.
Exactly. It reframes the whole act. It's not deprivation. It's a positive choice, a ritual. It creates that physical separation, that little bit of friction without feeling like you're being punished. It turns a chore into something slightly more mindful, a small step, but maybe a manageable one towards reclaiming some focus.
It's brilliant. And I will fully confess, I never actually made the box.
Yeah.
Not yet. But the idea is stuck in my head now.
Yeah.
Maybe next year. Maybe next January, we'll see. It just highlights, doesn't it, that while these huge policy debates happen and tech companies figure out their next move, our own personal choices, our own little habits and routines, they also play this really crucial, sometimes really difficult role.
And connecting that back to the big picture, it really shows that finding a healthier balance with these devices isn't just one thing. It involves governments trying bold, maybe sometimes clumsy regulations. It involves tech companies hopefully eventually prioritizing well-being in their design. And it involves each of us individually making conscious choices, setting boundaries, experimenting with things like phone bed. There's no magic bullet. It's this ongoing negotiation between us, the tech, and the rules. A truly holistic challenge.
And that brings us towards the end of this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? From our own slightly embarrassing screen time confessions. And to benchmarking that against the global averages, seeing just how deep this digital immersion goes. We look at that worldwide push for bans and restrictions, the UN, France, the UK, the US, Australia, and the huge practical and privacy hurdles involved.
And we really dug into that complex scientific debate about mental health, Haight's phone-based childhood theory, that stark Mount Everest analogy for the rise in distress, contrasted with the findings from Norway suggesting bans can help, but maybe nuanced ones work just as well. And then Professor Etzel's pushing back, questioning the causal evidence, warning about unintended consequences like the Cinderella law, calling for education and tech accountability, and always circling back to that fundamental challenge, correlation versus causation. Is it the phones directly or something else, or a bit of everything? The jury's still out, scientifically speaking.
And crucially, we heard those really insightful, nuanced views from the students themselves. Sonia, Ezer, Arlene, Richard, reminding us they're not just passive subjects in this. They have their own complex relationship with this tech. We touched on how the tech industry is responding, or maybe not responding enough. And we ended with some personal strategies, from the radical brick phone back down to the perhaps more achievable idea of a nicely decorated phone bed.
So, as you sit with all this, here's a final thought to chew on. Beyond governments banning things, beyond us trying to resist the urge to scroll, what responsibility do we have as users, as consumers, as citizens? If we can actually start having, as Professor Etchell suggested, more sensible, rational conversations about what we like and what we really don't like about the technologies that are a part of our day-to-day lives, how does that collective voice, our shared experience, empower us? How can it push tech companies towards building things that are genuinely better for us, more aligned with human well-being, not just engagement? Maybe our conversations, our choices, our demands as consumers, maybe they hold more power than we think to shape the future of this technology. It's about being active participants, not just passive users.
Absolutely. A powerful thought to end on. We really encourage you to reflect on your own relationship with your phone after hearing all this. What stood out most to you? Any phone bed plans in your future? You'll probably need to use your phone to tell us, which feels slightly ironic today. But we are on WhatsApp, we're on Instagram, and of course right here on YouTube. Leave us a comment below, share your thoughts, your screen time confessions if you dare. We'll be back with another deep dive very soon. Thanks for joining us. See you then.